So good afternoon, everybody. A quick bit of background. I am an industry analyst with analyst house Quocirca. Quocirca are like Gartner, who were mentioned earlier, except a little smaller and actually a lot cheaper. But that's another matter. My area of study as an analyst is broadly business communications, and specifically some of the areas that were just mentioned earlier, so mobile, social, cloud, and the Internet of Things or machine-to-machine. Those are really my areas of background through many years in the IT industry and then more latterly as an analyst. So I've been on the other side of the fence pushing a lot of those ideas, and now as an analyst working out where they might fit and how. I'm also grateful to the previous speaker bringing up Apollo 11. I have a particular interest in that area. I did spend a little bit of time working as a satellite control systems engineer, which sort of puts me down as a former rocket scientist. And the thing about Apollo 11, in fact, the thing about all of the Apollo program is, yes, absolutely, the technology did lag behind a long way what we have today in our pockets or in the palm of our hands. However, one thing they were incredibly strong on was process, and the people who went up, in particular, lived by processes. And a lot of them, in those days, of course, technology was very much paper. A lot of paper carried in order to help them through those processes. And I don't know, maybe there are one or two of you in the audience old enough to remember, but when Neil Armstrong landed Apollo 11 on the moon, they were going by the book, by the process, until the IT system, small though it was, started throwing up lots of errors. And it basically tore up the process and the rule book and did it all by hand. So the elements and the interaction between process, especially fixed processes, and IT is particularly important in any industry, whether you're a rocket scientist or someone in the insurance industry. And I bet you never thought you'd hear both of those in the one sentence. So what we did recently was we took a look into the insurance sector. We conducted a series of interviews. Now, the interviews were a decent number. 137 is a reasonable number to ask. We asked the right people. They were telephone-based interviews, but we asked the right people. We asked those who were responsible, primarily those responsible for cover holder status in a series of organizations. They were mostly brokers, so people that you either work for, support, or in fact perhaps are. We spanned lots of different vertical sectors within insurance. It was predominantly commercial line products, but right across the different industries in terms of the sectors. And a range of sizes of companies, which is sort of split into two groups, just to highlight a couple of the thoughts as we go through some of the slides. And really what I wanted to do was give you an early indication of some of the insights that came through from this research. The rest of it will be written up in a report. You will be able to sign up. I'll tell you how to get access to the report, but it says it is essentially a free report. I'll just say that again for those of you who remembered the word Gartner earlier. It is a free report for you to be able to access, download, and see a little bit more of the insight behind some of the research that we conducted. So I've broken it down into four areas. So firstly, thinking about reaching customers. So, okay, the challenge in any industry, and I encounter this a lot in my area, talking to lots of different industries, the challenge of reaching customers and giving them a good experience is just getting tougher. Expectations are rising. Customers expect to be reached anywhere, as you heard earlier, predominantly a lot now on mobile, certainly a lot online, if not on mobile, and that generates challenges. It's a 24/7 experience that they're expecting, but they're expecting consistency too. There's no point you having websites, mobile interaction, and face-to-face, and it all being different. You need to have a common, consistent experience out to your client base, whatever industry you're in. But all of these channels for reaching the customer are not only important, but they also sit alongside each other, and they overlap and interact. So you can't assume that if somebody comes in one way, that's the entire experience done for in that route. People start an interaction perhaps on a mobile device, move on to something else, and may finish up in face-to-face. So it's really important to have consistency and a pathway through all of this, a good process. In doing all of this, of course, it might be stimulating different relationships too, different types of either channel partners or even influencer partners who affect the relationship that you then have with those customers. Now, reaching people is getting harder, and it's certainly evolving. So here's some numbers from Ofcom in terms of how people like to be reached for doing commerce, and a variation between age groups. And I just picked out two, obviously, slightly different age groups. I think many of you probably sit either in the middle or towards the lower end of this, looking around. I am being dazzled a bit by the light, so I'm not entirely sure. But in terms of how people want to interact, there's a wide variety. There's still some consistency, though, about interacting face-to-face. This is still very important for all age groups, surprisingly enough. The phone, of course, is the next. Bit of a disparity between old and young. Basically, it's fixed or mobile. Fixed if you're old, mobile if you're younger, but essentially the phone is the next most important way of communicating. And then there are lots of other different ways, and definitely a skew going on here with some of the more trendy things such as social media and instant messaging and so on, which definitely appeal to a younger audience. I would have to say that from some of the other research that we've done, we understand that even the younger audience, whilst they're tech savvy, get a bit stuck in their ways as well. So people who've started communicating, for example, using Facebook and come up with and lived with that all of their life, find it really difficult to move on to other social media platforms, even though they are young. So don't sweat it if you're old and feeling a bit stuffy with some of this technology. Even youngsters are like that too. But still, there is a disparity in the way that people want to do interaction. Now, from the research that we did, particularly here, looking at the cover holders in this bit of insurance research, there was a bit of a mix in terms of how the organisations are trying to reach out to their end customers, and specifically, and there was a little bit of variation at this point, how they then make contact. Clearly, brokers, incredibly important channel and way of reaching through. Secondly, the more direct approach, right up there in terms of direct phone sales and also in terms of person-to-person, doing the face-to-face type thing. Incredibly important, and a little bit more so the face-to-face thing with the smaller companies. Online, in particular, kicks up more with the larger companies. Now, this, on the face of it, looks a bit counterintuitive. After all, surely online allows small companies to look like big ones, and so why wouldn't they be doing it? Good idea, but not always the case, because smaller companies can't necessarily afford to invest. Larger companies tend to be able to do that. Insurance agents, again, a little bit of a difference, but what we saw coming through from the research, not in this slide, is that smaller companies are getting more into and want to get more into the use of agents going forward. So an interesting way that that's going to evolve. Now, we've also seen from our other research into other industries across the UK, a great deal of interest in opening up and using new technologies to transact more directly, either directly into the channel, depending on who that channel is, or go direct to the end customers. And in particular, it's seen often as a way to bypass the channel and get right into the end customer. So improving partner loyalty, not showing up incredibly highly on this slide, as you can see there on the sort of top right. Right up at the top, though, being able to go direct to customers is a primary driver for opening up IT and adopting new channels, online channels and mobile channels in particular. Now, as companies are doing all of this, it's becoming increasingly important to become more attuned to the needs of the end customer, to personalize services in order to reach out to the right people. We all expect much more personalized services when we use online channels in any event, but this seems to be something that's lagging, I'd say, a little bit in your industry. I see this more often being done in other industries, the willingness, in fact, even stronger than a willingness, an imperative to drive out, to put into context the communication that's going on with an end customer or even through the channel. Is this something that people are doing in this industry enormously at the moment? It doesn't appear to be so from the research. It's a 50-50 number, which surprised me somewhat. I would expect you to be a bit more with that trend towards personalization that's going on elsewhere. However, we are where we are. So, business process and the excitement surrounding it. So most people find business process as interesting as many people out there find IT. It's not necessarily the most exciting thing, and yet is probably, along with IT, one of the two fundamental drivers of most things. It affects essentially how much money we can make as businesses and individuals. So to try and give you a bit of influence from the numbers from McKinsey, there are three, well, there's more than three, they list a whole bunch of technology sector and technology drivers over the next, as you can see, quite a significant time frame, so 15 years, 10, 15 years, that 2025 time frame. And the top three turn out to be these. The mobile internet, good, I like that, that's one of my key areas. The Internet of Things, another one, very key. You can see on both of those a little bit of a wide estimation by McKinsey in terms of what's the potential value. So very, very broad. Much less broad, and perhaps making it very interesting, is the automation of knowledge work. That's this combination of process and IT. That number there in the middle is, even at the low expectation, a pretty significant number. And in fact, if you look at it, that low number is pretty much the biggest number out of the three. So this is going to be, going forwards, an incredibly important area. Now, how are we today? Well-codified business processes inside the insurance industry? Not bad. More than 50%, very well. Solid yet flexible. Room for improvement elsewhere, I'd say, and especially, interestingly, in some of the larger companies. And by large, this was revenues rather than numbers of people in this particular split. So interesting that many could do better. And if we look at where it is that those many could do better, it's in this correlation between process and flexibility, and this is what's key. Those who think they have very flexible systems seem to be those who have much better codified processes. This is the combination of good IT going hand in hand with good process definition. Clearly, if you're in bad IT and bad process definition, you're probably in a much harder place competitively. So this is really, I think, where people should be heading. As part of dealing with processes, what is it that drives flexibility, or what is it that we mean by flexibility? It could be all sorts of things. This concept of big data that was mentioned earlier by the previous speaker, I'll pick up on that again because big data is an interesting area. As industry analysts, we're often asked about this and what does it mean? And people immediately assume it means lots. It doesn't necessarily mean lots. The element of volume with big data is only one part of it. It also means velocity, the change, the speed of change, the real-time element of data. It means variety, multiple different data sources being brought together, maybe different formats, maybe different types of data, some social data, some data collected through the system. It also then means a fourth V, veracity. How true is it? How accurate is it? And combination of all those things, that's what drives value out of big data rather than just pure volume. So capturing information as part of any process is key. If you're not capturing it, how are you going to analyze it later? You've not got it. So you must capture the data. So again, I think the industry could do better. Yes, and in context is great for almost 60%, but it needs to be driven a little higher. Then we're looking outside at other forms of data. The people that we asked, can they bring in data from other external sources? Well, about a third could, and 2/3 didn't, and actually a whole bunch of them didn't really care. Again, I think a major mistake. If you're going to start thinking about this industry and transformation going forwards and getting more flexible processes and getting better use of IT, this is fundamental to it. You need to be capturing, bringing in, and understanding the data that's out there. So that's part of the process. So is IT a help or hindrance in this process? The challenge in most organizations is that there's the business and there's IT, or the blockage in the end office, as it's sometimes called. It's seen as a separate function. It delivers lots of stuff, platforms, applications, functionality that is thought to be important, but doesn't necessarily align. This is what's critical. And even moving forwards with all of the innovation that's possible through the mobile world, through the data that could be collected in all sorts of different ways, through machines talking to each other or feeding back information to individuals, it needs to be aligned. The IT at the bottom and the business process at the top, either in isolation, isn't going to do it. Remember what Neil Armstrong had to do when he tore up his processors. There needs to be an alignment between processors, IT, and the external reality, and there often isn't in many organizations. Now, in terms of is IT delivering to these people in the insurance sector, pretty much everyone thought that they were getting the right sort of technical support. Certainly in the larger companies, perhaps with more resources at play, they felt pretty comfortable with that. Pretty much, people understand what it's costing. So those of you who are CIOs and so on, externally, people understand and are aware of the costs that you're bringing to the organization in terms of supporting them. Although in some of the larger companies, again, a little bit disconcerting, given that these were people pretty much with cover holder responsibility, that they weren't really aware in about a third of them. That's a little bit of a scary number in my mind. But what about value? Well, you probably noticed the axis on the slide sort of drops away a little bit and the percentages drop down. Are you getting very good value out of this IT support? Yeah, from almost half. That's more than half who, well, they'll say pretty good. Most people, when they're in surveys like this, respond a little bit more positively with questions like this than the reality. So I'd say that this probably skews a little bit down. It's not as good as the slide makes out, and that is potentially a concern. Even more of a concern is when we then ask them what's got the most impact on flexibility of the organization and the business process. IT department came out pretty low. Of the 4 items that we asked about, I think the software and the software product, that's what that was, when we broaden it out. The software product that's being used, that has a bigger impact. The software vendor has a reasonable impact in business process. Amongst the larger companies, the IT department had a little bit more sway, but not a lot. Also among the larger companies, the software vendor and the choice of software vendor was seen as much more important than with the smaller companies. So maybe there's a partnership and a relationship thing going on there, which is an external relationship, perhaps being viewed as more important than the internal relationship with the IT department, which again is a bit of a worrying trend. However, overall, as a result of the research, I think there are some reasons to be cheerful. There was certainly a feeling that if this is done right, then there could be some significant improvements for the organization. The big thing that everyone's expecting out there, out of getting better IT systems, more flexible processes and better IT support, more efficient deal processing. Get them coming in and going through faster. That's the primary driver. In terms of how that stacks up, in terms of what sort of percentages will you expect and anticipate out of improving your systems, these are all incremental. These are not transformational changes. I did say at the outset, I'm talking more back-end and process stuff here, which isn't my normal favorite place. But even back here, there are improvements. And if you're a significantly sized business, then getting 20% more coming through the door, then that's got to be worth having. For a little bit of investment in IT and alignment, critically, alignment of IT with the business processes and with the business. So that's where the value will come from. How much is it worth in terms of more efficient deal processing? It could be pretty significant. We are only talking a few hours a week per salesperson. Doesn't sound a lot, does it? When you start to add it up, and what I did was we took the live data, the real data out of the companies that responded, the numbers that they responded, the number of salespeople they had, multiplied it up, and we get a number. And the number is pretty significant. The number averages between 1,400 and 3,000 hours per year per company more sales hours. So more efficient deal processing has real tangible value. So although you can do all of these transformational things that you should be doing in any event, you should be looking at all of the things that you could do to change your industry, you also need to look at the legacy processes and the legacy IT infrastructures that you have and just improve them, make them better. And if you do, then you'll get great value. And apologies for the reference there at the bottom. I see there's probably nobody old enough to remember what that was, but it was a TV program back in the day. Thank you very much for your time. I hope it's what I've tried to do is try to trigger a few questions, which we could either take now or really be very useful to get you interacting with the panel debate. And as we head in towards lunch, maybe get some value out of that. The research was commissioned by Mercato Solutions, and the report will be available for free. There are a couple of ways that you can get access to it more readily. And as a final thing, I should say I am a volunteer lifeboat crew with an independent lifeboat, not the RNLI. There are around 50 of us around the UK, not part of the RNLI, but running boats. We'd all welcome your support. So any of you who have ever been anywhere near water on holiday or fishing or anything, just try and remember that we're all out there trying to help you and definitely value your support. Thank you very much for your time.